Oh, I got it. Okay.
Yeah, good.
It starts now. Okay. Well, glad to be here with you guys. I'm Josh Sofair,
Annette?
Annette, and we're your speakers for this week. We've been really looking forward to this over the last couple of, well, actually, since last year when we were here. So it's really nice to be back. And a few of you we met last year, I think. And so we're glad to be back. We're looking forward to the time. And so tonight, what we want to do is just kind of do some introductions of us, our ministry, tell you a little bit about who we are, and kind of introduce what's happening. I know you guys are tired, so we're not going to do a long thing, but just we'll start with some pictures because everybody likes pictures. So this is a recent picture of our family. This was in Oregon, on Mount Hood in Oregon near Portland. Our daughter here and this guy just got married, and they got married in this spring, and they live in Portland, Oregon. Um, this daughter is a senior at Sacramento State, so she's just about to finish Sac State, and we'll see what happens next. She wants to work in museums, so she studied like curating and all of this kind of stuff. So and that's us. So this is our family, the Sofair family. Our daughter Eliana got married in a cave by choice, not like nobody forced her. So this was where the wedding was. This was like way underground. It was in Virginia. So we did a destination wedding to a cave in Virginia. Yeah, it was kind of, never done it before. These are our two girls here, and that's Patrick, who married our daughter, Eliana. So, and that's me walking her down the aisle with all the stalactite in the background. So, yeah, it was kind of pretty crazy. Um, we were in a place called Luray, Virginia, which is kind of near Washington, D.C. So it was a lot of fun. Um, and so this is a little bit of our family. We have our girls. So Eliana's 26, Talia's 24, and so we raised our girls mostly in New York City, but for the last 12 years or so, we moved to Los Angeles. And I figured since all this is going on now, I would just show you a few of these pictures. So these are pictures from the fire. And this picture is just down the street from our house. So we were on the north side of the fire. So the Palisades fire. So the wind is blowing away from us. So we weren't ever really in any danger, but this is like what LA looked like with just huge plumes of smoke everywhere. And yeah, it was a pretty kind of frightening experience. Um, but we're here, and LA is you are going to see you might see part of the areas that are like the burn scar, and I don't know what it's going to be like in a month, but we'll see. The There were at this point 16,000 structures that were burned, and about 12,000 of those were homes. And so it's a lot of homes to burn to the ground. So if some of you, some who's from Chico, someone who's telling me that, yeah. So it's not so different than like the Paradise Fire or the fires that were in Northern California and Santa Rosa and some of these places that just wiped through a neighborhood. It was pretty amazing. So we live and work in Los Angeles. We're both in full-time ministry with an organization called Jews for Jesus. And so we're both from Jewish backgrounds, and we both believe in Jesus as the Messiah. And our ministry is reaching out to Jewish people to share that message. And we do different things. And so we're going to tell a little bit about that. But here are a couple of just photos. Um, this is, I'll tell about these two. And then why don't you tell about these two?
About which
you,
Okay, yes.
you,
Right.
and this one.
So this bottom right-hand
Okay.
corner one, that is the cafe that we run across the street from UCLA. And we use it as we say, it's called Upside Down. That's the name of the cafe. And it's kind of the idea of like, in the book of Acts, they talk about these men who are turning the world upside down, with this message of Jesus. But also the idea that Jews could believe in Jesus sounds like a kind of upside down thing, but actually it's really a good thing. So the cafe, the little motto is Cafe Art Community. And we serve great coffee. They're very obsessed about how good the coffee should be. And everybody loves it. And it's a by donation kind of model, and so everybody loves that about it too. That you pay what you want. And then in terms of art, you can see up there we do art shows. We do one student art show each year where we invite UCLA students to submit their art. But then the other shows that we do, we usually are inviting. Sometimes we invite some Christians, sometimes it's people from Biola. But then we do at least one art show a year where we're inviting Jewish people who are not believers, maybe Israelis, just different people to create art for us that we commission. We pay them to create it, and then we display it, and then we use it in other places where we have art galleries too. So we use art as a means of outreach and conversation and springboard for workshops and things like that. And that kind of leads to the third idea, which is community. And in this space, we have all sorts of community events to build community, to open up the opportunities to relate to people and have conversations with the students. So we do Shabbat, Sabbath dinners once a month in the space. We do art workshops. We do coffee tastings. Challah braiding. Challah is the Jewish braided egg bread, teaching people how to make that. So different, all sorts of different things like that. We've got a Bible study series that we're starting this week. That's like a 4 or 5 week series. All of these are things designed, and they're all on different levels. Some are like not religious, spiritually themed at all. It's just an opportunity for them to start to get to know our staff. And then they kind of go from not spiritual at all to a Bible study, and everything in between. So that's what the cafe is about. Yeah.
Right. So Annette is part of our LA team. I'm part of our global team. So Jews for Jesus has about 275 staff in 12 countries. And so I work with the team that is focused on training and staff development. And so I work with leaders, I work with kind of emerging staff. So these two pictures, this is a picture of Annette and I in London in November. We were there. And these are different leaders. So she leads a coffee shop that we have in New York City called Mosheva. He leads an entire team of people doing ministry through live chat on our website, an online evangelism team. She leads our work in Hungary, in Budapest. He is in charge of our communications and website, and he leads our branch in Johannesburg, South Africa. So these are young emerging leaders that we have a leadership training for, that we work with them over the course of about 18 months. These guys up here, I'm there, and the 4 of them with me are all young Israelis. We're right next to the old city of Jerusalem. The wall is kind of behind us on the top left there. And so I was in Israel this summer working with them, and it's 4 young guys that are coming on missionary staff, and they've just started. So all of the 4 of them are people that have grown up in Israel. They're Israelis. They grew up in homes of believers, actually, all of them. And so it's kind of an interesting thing to be able to work with these guys who are Israelis who are coming up. We have about 60 full-time staff in our Tel Aviv and Jerusalem offices. So yeah, it's pretty cool that they're there. And so that's what a lot of my work is. So I'm going to share a little bit about kind of how I got into this. and then maybe you can do the same, and then we'll go to the
I was
next.
just going to say,
Oh.
in my work, I work
Oh.
somewhat with the cafe, but then the other thing I do is I'm a missionary to Jewish women. So what that means is wherever they contact us, whether they get in touch with us through the website or call our office, or a friend asks us to call them or whatever, and I dialogue one-on-one with Jewish women who are open to learn more about the Bible and learn more about Jesus and want to study. And I also lead an online Zoom Bible study for those women. So leading them to the Lord, discipling them, getting them plugged into a good fellowship somewhere, a church or a Messianic congregation. And I have just started also now, we're starting like a leadership team in the LA branch. So, and I'll be sort of supervising, because our branch has a couple of people who finished their missionary training, but then we have a bunch of people who are missionary trainees and interns. And so kind of helping them all to get into the rhythm of what it means to be a missionary from day to day, and kind of supervising them and farming out all of the contacts that come into us from our website, or, people calling in, making sure all those people get followed up on, and what's the process you go through when people express an interest in the gospel. So that's what I do. Yeah.
So Annette and I both served full-time for a bit over 30 years on staff with Jews for Jesus. And so getting into this for us was a very different story. So for me, I grew up in a Jewish family in the San Francisco Bay Area. And anyone from the Bay Area here? All right, good. East Bay, El Cerrito, Berkeley, that part of the Bay Area? No, okay, all right. Well, that's where I grew up. So grew up in the East Bay to a pretty secular Jewish home. We were not a particularly religious Jewish home, but we celebrated all the holidays. I had a bar mitzvah. I went to Jewish camp in the summers. We went to Israel as kids, and so I had this real strong identity, and had no interest in Jesus. Zero. In fact, -0. And so I don't know if that's a thing, but -0, yeah. So when I graduated high school, a buddy and I decided to travel, and we spent a year. This is before there was such a thing as a gap year. It was just
I don't want to go to college.
it was just making my parents upset at me. That was the year. So we traveled, and I spent a year in New Zealand and Australia, and traveling around and meeting people. We ended up getting jobs picking apples in New Zealand on an apple orchard. And this orchard was owned, and many of the people that worked there were Christians. And it might seem strange, but I'd never really met a Christian before. I didn't know anybody that believed in Jesus. I knew some people that said they were Christians, but they partied as much as I did on the weekends, so it seemed like it didn't really matter, right? Like I was Jewish and they were Christian, but none of that really mattered so much. We were kind of the same. So these guys were into it. They read the Bible, they prayed, they went to church, they listened to Christian music, which I didn't know that existed. I didn't know that was a thing. And so they started sharing with me. And I initially thought they were crazy and foolish, and it didn't make any sense to me. But over the course of the next couple of weeks and months, I started kind of becoming more and more interested. And the thing that really kind of drew me in was reading scripture. And the first book in the Bible I read was the book of Ecclesiastes, which is still probably my favorite book in the Bible, and I think one of the most evangelistic books in all of Scripture. And so it remains a favorite, but I read all about me in Ecclesiastes. And so it kind of drew me, and at the end it says, when all has been said, fear God and keep his commandments. And I thought, well, I don't know what that means or how to do that, but I should probably figure that out. So over the next year, read a lot, asked a lot of questions, came to believe in Jesus, was baptized, came back to the States, and my family and friends flipped out. It was like the worst possible thing I could have done with my family. In fact, several people in my family didn't talk to me for years after that, because I'd really betrayed what they had, kind of their idea of what it meant to be Jewish. So, moved to Lake Tahoe, moved to South Lake Tahoe, got a job at the ski resort, rode my bike around to I knew I wanted to go to a church, right? Because that's what I was supposed to do, and I wanted to. But I didn't know the difference between like the churches, like Mormon, Catholic, Lutheran, Baptist. I didn't really know what the difference between any of those things were. So I stayed at the church that had donuts before the service. And that was like the Baptist church, right? Of course. And so that's where I stayed and kind of, grew in my faith there, got really involved, and then ended up coming to like came with Jews for Jesus to do like a trip to Israel for college students, and then got more involved and then found my way into ministry. Probably the last thing I would have imagined when I was young, but that was the kind of path that God brought me on to bring me to where I am now. We met in New York City. I was a student intern. Annette was new staff. We actually met in Times Square on New Year's Eve, but it was not quite as romantic because it was like in the subway station. So subway station's not as romantic. It's also super cold on New Year's Eve in Times Square. But yeah, so we've been married now just over 30 years also. And yeah, so what's your story?
So mine is very different from Josh's. I come from a family with 3 generations of Jewish believers in Jesus. My grandparents were the first ones to come to faith in Jesus. And I am from Fresno. Any Fresno? Yeah, just a few, huh? Okay, yeah. Uh-huh. So.
Anybody go
yeah.
to the Bridge Church? Do you know that church, the Bridge? No? Okay, she grew up there.
Yeah, I grew up in the Bridge Church with the Yorks. Okay, there's a York here, isn't there?
Wow.
Related to Marcy York and no? Okay.
No.
I was going to say, yeah, there's a York family that was in the Bridge, and also lots of involvement up here at Hume Lake too. So that's when I saw your name, I thought, I wonder. Okay. So anyway, yeah, and how did Jews end up in Fresno? That's a good question. So there are Jews in Fresno, believe it or not. So what happened is, so my family was from Vienna, Austria. And when the Nazis marched in to Austria in 1939, my grandma said to my grandpa, Arthur, it's time to go. And so my grandparents left Europe, and they were sponsored by a family member and settled in New York City. My great uncle and his wife left Europe later because he ended up in one of the work camps, Dachau. And so my great uncle and his wife ended up in a refugee camp in Shanghai, China for a while. But then the Jewish community of Fresno sponsored them to come out of China to America. And so that was how first my great uncle and his wife, and then my grandparents settled in Fresno, connected to the Jewish community, and they set them up in business and got a place for them to live and everything. And my grandfather was an oral surgeon, but he only spoke German, so he had to go into business with his brother. And the business was recycling feed and seed sacks from the farmers around the Central Valley. And so my grandfather, Mr. Morgenstern, would drive around to all of the small communities and do business with the farmers. He would buy back the old Holy used, burlap and cotton sacks, and then they'd take them home and they'd all work on mending them, and they'd sell them back to the feed and seed companies. So it's like an early recycling business. And so on one of those trips out and about, my grandfather ended up on the doorstep of a farmer whose last name was Clausen in Reedley. And Farmer Clausen, I know there will be all sorts of connections. He's a Mennonite. I've already seen at least one Mennonite name on the list.
That's right.
And And I've actually spoken at the Reedley Mennonite Church and told my grandfather's story. And a woman came up to me whose name was Helen Krause. She's
Oh, you're
passed
jumping
away.
ahead though. You got to go back
and
to
told, and she told
yeah.
me more details about my grandfather's story. So what happened is that he met Mr. Clausen, and Mr. Clausen loved the Lord, loved the Jewish people because he knew that they were God's chosen people, and always taught his children to care for them and pray for them. And who should show up on his doorstep but a Jewish guy who spoke German, and Mr. Clausen spoke German. And so he, over the months, that they would do business, anytime my grandfather came there, they would get together and do business, and then he would invite my grandfather into the kitchen. They'd open up the scriptures, and they'd argue about who the Messiah was supposed to be. And my grandfather eventually became convinced that indeed Jesus was the promised Messiah for the Jewish people too. And so came to faith in Jesus, and this was in the 1940s. And eventually my whole family that was left, I mean, a large part of my family perished in the Holocaust, but the ones who came and escaped became believers here in the Central Valley. So that was, but in the 1940s, the idea, like, if you became a believer in Jesus and you were Jewish, you'd become a Christian and you converted and you were no longer Jewish. And so that was kind of the way that my dad was raised, and he married a Christian woman. And it wasn't until I was like about 5 years old or so that my dad's pastor introduced him to these people who called themselves Jews for Jesus. And the idea was actually, that believing in Jesus is a very Jewish thing, and that all Jewish people should follow him because he's the Messiah. And if you do, you don't stop being Jewish, you don't stop being what God made you, but rather this is like a fulfillment of that. And it's kind of like a missions technique, you might say. But it changed the way I grew up, because from that point on, in my home, we'd celebrate Hanukkah and Christmas. Like if you walked into our house, there'd be a Hanukkah banner up and a Christmas tree, or we celebrated Passover and Easter. But more than just like having more holidays, there was that understanding, that our faith in Jesus was part of our culture. It all made sense to me when we learned about this Jewish man who lived in Israel and all his disciples were Jewish, and it all made sense to me. So that's kind of what the home is that I grew up in. I went to Biola, graduated from Biola. My rest of my family all went to Fresno State. My mom was a professor at Fresno State. But I was really interested in Biola and ended up going there. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to start volunteering with the local LA Jews for Jesus branch there. So all through my college years, I started volunteering with them, doing evangelism and also doing music in churches. I was a music major. And then after college, I toured. We used to have a national touring music team that also did evangelism. And then after that, and we traveled internationally. And after that, I was invited to be a missionary, to start missionary training with Jews for Jesus, which I did. Moved to New York City for that, because that's where all American English-speaking missionaries were trained in those days. So I ended up in New York City. Yeah, a girl from Fresno. So quite a contrast. But LA and New York. So and that's where I met Josh.
So I wanted to put a right.
Sorry.
Oh,
sorry to
go
interrupt.
ahead.
I obviously had to have a point in my life where I came to believe that this was true also. I was 5 when I prayed with my mom to receive Jesus, because I understood, oh yeah, you need to, if you want to be forgiven, if you want to be in heaven with the Lord, you got to accept Jesus, So that happened when I was 5. And when I was 13, I started to ask myself, do I really believe this, or is this just, what my parents raised me with? And, kind of began to think about it for myself. Do I believe that there's a God? Do I believe any of this? And even at that point, I felt like if I were to, I couldn't see a meaning for life if we just sort of randomly existed. There's no God. And also the idea of not believing in God, even by that point in my life, felt like I would be turning my back on my own father. And so I really, at that point, that was when I made a commitment that I wanted to follow Jesus. I wanted to tell other people about him, ask to be baptized, and yeah, and then that was kind of why then going to Biola, I just really felt a call not only to ministry, to to something in ministry and missions, but then towards Jewish evangelism.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
since you said that, stay there
Okay.
because I'm going to ask you another question.
Yes.
Because I'm going to put a picture up here. You don't even know this is up there.
I can see it.
Yeah.
Right
Okay. So this is a picture, and we are in this picture. And if you're bored with listening to us, you can try and find us. But this is
Yeah.
in 1993, and we are both in New York City on a 32 years ago. We're on a summer outreach evangelistic trip in New York City for the month, and this is kind of the time, and for us, you were a little bit before this, but the time when we're trying to figure out what's God's calling on our lives. Like, how is it that we knew or thought we knew, or how we even came to know that God would call us into ministry or call us in any way? Or how does God even lead you, So and I know some of you are kind of asking some of those questions as well. So I figured we would share a little bit about that. And then I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about Jews for Jesus, and then we'll be wrapped up for tonight.
So how did I?
How'd you know that God was calling you to something?
Yeah. Yeah. So as I said, when I really made that commitment of faith at like 13 years old and got baptized, I also wanted to do that because I saw, from my friends around me that already at that age they were starting to feel lost. Like what's the purpose of it
Mm.
all? And um, so I knew that I wanted to share the love and the light of God with my friends, and so I had that evangelistic kind of thing. And going to Biola, of course, just grew that in me. But and then growing up with the staff, I knew some of the staff of Jews for Jesus in our growing up years, and we were always really excited whenever the Jews for Jesus missionaries came through town because they were the only other people in the world like us, and so there was a special kind of affinity towards that group of people, but I didn't have any official, anything to do with them at that point when I went to Biola. But I was, as I said, I was a music major. And the first day I walked in for my first class at Biola, there was an easel in the middle of the lobby, right in front of our faces. And
Mm.
on that easel, there was a letter typed up on Jews for Jesus letterhead. And so it immediately caught my eye because I hadn't had any direct contact with Jews for Jesus for a while. I saw that and I walked up to it, and the letter said, "Hey, we're looking for young people who would be interested in serving with our local Jews for Jesus music team." And I was like, "Oh, really?" Because at Jews for Jesus in those days, I don't think it's the same now, but in those days, everybody had to do Christian service every semester. You had to do like a certain number of hours every semester, and you had to serve with either a ministry or some sort of volunteer group. So I was looking for that, and immediately, first day of school, I see Jews for Jesus looking for people to work with them.
Mhm.
So I started volunteering with them, ended up volunteering all through college. And in those years, it was so formative for me because it was the first time I was hanging out with a lot of other Jewish believers in Jesus. And these were people much more like Josh. They were all people who were first generation believers. And so they just had a lot more sort of culturally Jewish stuff about them.
We were problematic, is really the
Problem.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was very helpful for me because it began to teach me, well, what are the problems that Jewish people have with the gospel, with Jesus? And what really is the culture like, And so I was just immersed in that all through my college years.
Mm.
And so then, had the opportunity to serve on this music team, which was a great experience, both the local and then the national one. Lots more outreach opportunities. When I finished the touring team, as I said, I was invited to go to missionary training in New York City, but I wasn't quite sure that I wanted to commit to that because the tour that I'd gone on had also been a little hellish because I was living on a bus with 8 other people, and we were traveling around the country singing 6 nights a week in 5 or 6 cities per week. Exhausting. We all wanted to kill each other by the end of the tour. You know, you can imagine living on a tour bus. It was, yeah. And so I was like, I think I need space for a while from Jews for Jesus, you know. So I came back home, and I was like, Lord, I want you to tell me I'm gonna take a semester, and I'm gonna recover from this crazy experience, and I'm gonna wait on you, and I'm gonna pray, and I'm gonna like get back into doing things that are good for me, exercising, eating right, and whatever, and I'm gonna go out on a few dates. I'm going to audition for the orchestra. I'm going to look at some different, Fresno Philharmonic, because I'm a violist. So I was like trying different things. And I thought, okay, if God wants to open a door to keep me here in Fresno, great, I will. I'll stay. But nothing, none of those doors really opened. So at the end of the semester, I'm like, okay, New York City, here we come. And, so went there. That was also an extremely difficult experience, but I felt like this is where the Lord wanted me. And it is funny. My first missionary assignment was to go and hand out gospel tracts on New Year's Eve in Times Square. And that evening, I met Josh.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't love
Yeah.
at first sight or anything.
No.
That's a different story.
It wasn't even like toleration at first sight. There were 4 other guys. One was like a former ballerina. 2 guys were from a ballerina. Oh, he wasn't a ballerina. A ballet dancer. You're right. So there was right. There was 2 guys from Russia. There was a guy from like Brazil, and then there was just me. So yeah.
Yeah, and Josh just seems so all-American average.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
It's like there's nothing exotic about him.
Something happened.
Little did I know.
Little did
8
you know.
months later, we'd be married.
Yep, that's it. I know. Yeah. That's right. Locked it down. So, okay. So my story is a little different because I thought, so you figure out where we are. Did you find us?
Yeah, which one do you think is Josh? No.
Third row, top right? No. Yes, right there. That's me. That's me. Good call. And you see Annette? Right there. Yeah, that's it.
Got it.
With the like ankle brace or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So so for me, calling was actually a little different because one of the things that I had to face was my family was completely against all of this. And so I don't know if any of you are from families who are not really believers or not really all that interested in this, but they were really, really upset that I was considering this. And so that was a challenge that I had to kind of go through. People had asked me in these years, in 1993, like, how do you know that God has called you to do this work? And I basically said, I don't. I don't know. I like this. I think I'm kind of good at it. I'm relatively happy. And I'm not doing something like evil, right? It's generally good. I'm telling people about Jesus. So over the next couple of years, that's kind of what kept me going. Even when I came on staff, I wasn't totally sure that this is what God called me to do. But what I discovered was I discovered God's calling as I was doing the work. So it wasn't so much that like I prayed, God said, okay, do this, and then I did it. It was sort of the process happened for me as I was doing it that I really kind of thought, I really like this and I'm good at it. I feel God's presence when I'm doing this. I'm seeing fruit happening through me. And so all of that kind of worked together to just create an environment where it just kind of made sense. And it was that's at least how the process of calling worked for me. So really briefly, let me just share a little bit about Jews for Jesus and a little bit about who we are. So most of you are familiar with like a ministry outreach format that's like a local church. What you do is you go to a church, you go to a town, right? And you open a church and you sort of say, hey, all the people that are in this town, we want to be a place for you to come and hear about God and learn about Jesus and study the Bible and grow together and in community. And so it's a very broad kind of gate where all people are welcome. Some of you might go to a church that, let's say, is in a particular language. So you could be going to a church that's in Spanish or some other language. And so this now sort of narrows the gate a little bit, where you're focusing on people that speak Spanish. Well, in evangelism and in ministry, you also often have situations where you're really narrowing your focus down on a particular group of people or a particular audience. College ministry is a little bit like this, or ministry to athletes on a college campus is an even smaller one. So our ministry focuses on Jewish people. There are about 5.5 million Jewish people in the United States. There's about 6.5 million Jewish people in Israel. And then there's about 6 million Jewish people in every other country put together. So that there aren't that many Jewish people in the world. And in America, out of the 5.5 million, 2 million live in the New York metropolitan area. 750,000 live in LA, 500,000 live in South Florida. So they're centered in these kind of like urban areas. And so our ministry is in urban areas around the world. So we're in New York, we're in LA, in London, in Paris, in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, in a number of cities around the world. And we focus our outreach toward the Jewish people for kind of two reasons. One of them is that if we don't focus on Jewish people, we actually will miss them. Because if you focus on the broad community, Jewish people will say, oh, this isn't for us. And it won't really make much of a difference. But if you focus specifically in on this audience, then it allows you to communicate very kind of strategically and purposefully into this community. The second thing is we are what's called, in the world of missions, an insider ministry. Do you have any idea what that means? An insider ministry? You can guess, probably. It's sort of localized. But insider, yeah, you have an idea? Or people who are like you. So, like, let's say you have a women's ministry. Hey, we're going to have a women's ministry event. And then there's like 4 guys on the platform. And they're like, okay, ladies, we're going to have a great night. And it's going to be awesome. You know, I mean, women there might go, oh, you know, okay, like, you know. But it's different when you have a group of people that a women's event that's run by women. You know what I mean? And so insider ministry is it is local in the sense of like identity and community. So our staff with Jews for Jesus are all Jewish. So the mission staff that are all, so it's Jewish people talking to other Jewish people about Jesus.
I would say the local aspect is something in
Yeah.
our ministry that's important because
Yep.
we're all Jewish, the missionaries, but we tend to want, like in Russia, we want our staff to be Russian Jews.
Yeah.
Because then they don't have to like
Yeah.
deal with all trying to learn the culture. They're in the
Right.
culture. Same thing in Israel. Most of our staff are Israelis.
Right.
You know, all of
So-
the places we try to do that.
Right. So we don't send Americans off to do the work. So in Paris, the staff for French, and in Germany, the staff for German. Or what we're starting to do is with communities where there are Israelis, let's say moving and living in London, which there are a lot, we will send a team of Israelis. And they have a Hebrew speaking ministry in London to Israelis. So it's this, so our ministry has kind of got a very interesting strategic side to it. You've kind of familiar with the term unreached people group? Okay. Do you know what qualifies somebody to be an unreached people group? Any idea? Okay, they haven't heard the gospel at all. What's that? Nobody's gone, right? Or maybe what if you have like a group of people who, a few people have gone, but they haven't really made much progress, right? So, or they're trying, like, that's another kind of category. Yeah, what else? Unreached people group. There's no church, or a very small kind of a number of people, right? You said there's very little of the New Testament or the Bible translated, usually in their native language. Have you ever heard of the Joshua Project? Right, okay, so the Joshua Project is this group that like kind of quantifies all of this. So the guy that leads the Joshua Project, Chris Clayman, is he's done research on what groups are the most unreached. And in North America, the groups that are the most unreached are the Orthodox Jewish communities in New York City, or the Hasidic Jewish communities. And so there's zero ministry going on to these communities. I mean, there's a few. We have a few people that are doing ministry to these communities, but by and large, we'll say that of the Jewish community, about 1% believe in Jesus as the Messiah in America. And in Israel, it's about 1/10 of 1%. So it's a very small number of people. And so our ministry is one of lots. We're not the only ones. We're not the biggest. We're not even necessarily the most effective, but we are effective together. And so there's a lot of different ministries that work together to try and communicate. So when we're here, we're going to talk about our ministry. We're going to talk about how the Jewishness of the New Testament, the Jewishness of Jesus comes to play in our faith and in the Bible and in our life. Tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit about the biblical holidays, and tomorrow night we're going to have a Passover Seder together. If some of you have never done that, it's a pretty cool thing. So we're going to lead you through that on Wednesday, and that's going to lead a time of kind of training around personal evangelism, how to share the gospel in an effective way that starts not with what to say, but starts with listening. And then on Thursday morning, I'm going to share a bit of some historical background and kind of context to what's going on in Israel and Gaza. And it's a little kind of like, contemporary. It's a little political, although I'm not going to get too far into that. But just, it's such a big deal right now. And if you were on a college campus this year or last year, all of the protests on college campuses have been such a big deal that, I wanted to share, we did this last year too, I wanted to share a bit of maybe giving you some handles on how to understand and how to think about this. I'm not trying to make you think like I think, but I want to give you the tools to help you have a kind of an orientation to how to engage with that. So, and we're around all week, and it's really a joy for us to come. And what's really cool is we'll see you in a month in LA. And so we'll get a chance to see you guys again, take you out on the campus at UCLA, go out and engage with students. You can see our work down there. So it's a lot of fun to be together. So that's all we've got tonight. Tomorrow you guys have right? You get to ask us all the kind of questions that you want. Okay. So we told you a lot about us. So I don't know if we took away all the questions, but you can think of some. So, sound good? Okay. So I'm going to close us in a word of prayer. That's normally how you close things tonight, right? Right? Dallas went down to put his kids to bed, and everyone I know, you guys were all tired from your trip, and kind of just getting back into Pacific time zone and things like that. So I'm going to pray for us and then dismiss us. And I just want to say thank you for letting us come and spend this time with you. So, Father, thank you for just the amazing message that you brought, that in you we all can have access to you through Jesus the Messiah. Thank you for the chance that we together can serve you, that we can grow in you, that we can learn about you. Thank you for the ministry in the Dominican Republic. We pray that you continue to bring fruit and you continue to use the time and the investment and the conversations to further what you're doing in the lives of many different people. And Father, I pray for this week ahead that we would we would learn and we would grow. And God, that you would speak to us about who we are in you. We pray this in Yeshua, Jesus' name. Amen.